Welcome, tennis fans, to the 24th episode of Tennis Traverse, Exploring the Game, the podcast that delves into the heart of the tennis world. I'm your host, Ivy J. And in today's episode, I'll be doing a book review on Ben Rothenberg's biography, Naomi Osaka. And this is just like a highly anticipated episode, I feel like. A lot of people are really excited, including him, which is really exciting. He reposted what I posted on Twitter about me getting my Naomi Osaka biography, but it's a really highly anticipated episode, and I finished this book, and even though I thought I was gonna finish this book in like a week, but I had a high fever. I was like taking days off from school. Just a lot of stuff happened, including a lot of tests from like midterms and stuff, so I'm not sorry that this episode didn't come out sooner because we had Australian Open, but I figured because it's just like the week off from Australian Open that maybe we should sort of like switch things up a bit, and because there isn't that many tournaments going on, it's like not really important tournaments, so I feel like it's a great time for me to just, do my book review, and I promised you guys, so we do have a lot to cover, and yeah, let me just do my social media plugins. So you guys can follow me on Instagram and Twitter using @TennisTraverse. That is @TennisTraverse. If you're listening on YouTube, comment, like, and subscribe. If you're listening on other streaming platforms, please rate my show, and it would really mean a lot to me if you guys can follow me, because I really want my podcast to go big, because it means a lot to me, like this podcast. So yeah, please go follow me, and yeah, let's get right into today's episode. So I left a link to the Amazon page for this biography. It's kind of expensive, not gonna lie. It's for the hardcover, it's $28, and for the paperback, it's $36, which is insane, but I'm pretty sure if you guys want to just go on other places, you'll probably find some that's cheaper, but I just left the Amazon link here, and the author, Ben Rothenberg, he's like a really good journalist. He's a tennis journalist, and because I really want to be a journalist when I grow up, he's someone I look up to, and he also has a podcast, and it's called No Challenges Remaining, and I left a link for you guys down below too if you guys want to go check it out. Okay, let's just get into the book, I guess. So first, I want to start off with some just overall thoughts, and then after that, I will talk about some specific things I really loved, and some things that I was like, I don't know if that's the like right choice to like write it like that, but overall I really loved it, and then I'll give my overall rating like after. So yeah, let's just start off with the overall compliments. The first thing that really stood out to me was how specific it was, because honestly I did not expect this to be this thick. There was like 452 pages, I'm pretty sure. It's really a handful. It's so much stuff. It's really, really specific, and I love that. There's a lot of sources, and he also left like the sort of like the citation stuff in the end, which is really cool, and I loved how specific it was. I feel like this can go either way, because for some people who aren't that like into Naomi Osaka might be like, what, why is there so much info? But like in the end, it's a biography, and I just loved it. I learned so much stuff. I was honestly surprised, because I thought like I was like the biggest Naomi Osaka fan in the world, but after reading this, I really learned a lot, and it's not just about how Naomi Osaka is. It's like about tennis in general, which I will get into later, but yeah, I loved that. And then I also loved how he decided to use other biographies. So like with writing this, he put in a lot of work. He probably read a lot of like sources and stuff, obviously, but he also cited Naomi Osaka's mom's autobiography and Sasha Bayan's, which is Naomi's former coach, which I find really insightful, because obviously these two people are people that have really sort of close connections with Naomi Osaka, so it's really cool to listen to like another perspective in this book, like another book's perspective in this book, if that makes sense. It's just like super cool, I guess, for me. And I really, really loved again how mental health is covered throughout. It didn't just like, because I feel like mental health is the thing that if it isn't sort of covered throughout, it's really hard for the readers who isn't like into tennis or who don't know who Naomi Osaka is to get why she decided to like sort of withdraw from all those tournaments. But I feel like this actually did a good job. Like from the first page, I feel like I have annotations on it, and I said how like literally mental health is mentioned. And I feel like maybe, okay, I'll talk about this later, but I really loved how mental health is covered throughout. And then the next one is how he sort of explained how the tennis press works, which is super important because it is a part of Naomi's career, how she decided, like her relationship with the press. She explained it in a way that if you're not into tennis, you'll understand it. And if you're into tennis, I feel like it educates you more because in the end, he is a journalist. He like interviewed Naomi Osaka in a press conference before, so he knows what's going on, and I feel like it's a really great way for the readers to understand her, like Naomi Osaka's thinking. And then it's like how tennis works just in general. Like I really liked how he described the families, like the Grand Slam, the ITF stuff. Like it's just really fascinating to me. Maybe it's just me, but like I've never heard of tennis like that. And yeah, it was just really entertaining and interesting for me. And then the other interesting fact is how the ethnicities worked, because obviously Naomi is mixed. She's from Japan and Haitian. So talking about she decided to choose her Japanese citizenship, and how like there was not a spoiler, but there were like different ways to categorize someone as Japanese, which is like super entertaining. I didn't know I would learn about stuff other than tennis or like other about than Naomi from reading this book, right? But I learned a lot. So all of these three, I feel like, just shows how much research and how hard Ben Rothenberg worked in this book, and that I love. And then the other thing I loved in general is how he literally really showed how Naomi isn't just like a tennis player, which is the message she wants to deliver to us. And I feel like he showed it perfectly, even though a chunk, like the majority of this book is Naomi training herself for tennis and her playing tennis. A large part of it is also her sponsorships. There was like one of those pages where like everything is all the things she got sponsored from, which is super cool, and it kind of just shows how Naomi Osaka is like more than a tennis player. And then I also do want to mention how like he mentioned multiple times that Naomi Osaka is like the most paid athlete, which I find really shows how Naomi Osaka is more than a tennis player. She's also an entrepreneur and just like a really amazing person in general. So yeah, really happy about that. The next thing is how he did cover a lot of controversies, and yeah, I love that because I feel like Naomi Osaka, even though like I love her, she do have some controversies, and I did not know that she had a lawsuit, even though it was like a minor lawsuit, but I did not know that. If you guys want to go find out, please read the book. I literally didn't know that. I was like, what? But yeah, I really liked how he covered the controversies because he sort of showed if the roundness of Naomi, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like after reading this book, it's like my mind has a version of Naomi Osaka and it builds up more to that version. It's like he's creating it for it to be a three-dimensional person, and he did a really good job, especially with all those things that happened around her. And what else? The next thing is how it's good for non-tennis people. As I said, I feel like I said it before, like even if you're not into tennis, you can read this, even though he like say that, like the author, he was like, if you're not into tennis, it's still a great book, but it's because he's the author. But like I genuinely think that if you don't know tennis at all, you can still read this book if you're interested, I guess, because not only does it cover Naomi Osaka, it covers the tennis world. Like it explains stuff. It's not like you have to know what the Grand Slams are to like read this book. It'll explain to you what they are. So, and even if you don't know how, like, because I feel like the scoring system is a big part, but he explains it. So yeah, really like this part about this book. The next one is, I feel like it carried out Naomi's personality completely. With all those press conferences responses and just like all her interviews, there's literally so many quotes in this book that I feel like we sort of get Naomi Osaka's quirkiness through this book. It just shows how she's such a funny person, and like her personality, like her shyness before, and how she decided to, for example, do those Instagram lives. I feel like he covered it really well, and his like no, and her journey of like being on Twitter and making friends there is just super relatable, I feel like. And yeah, just liked how he covered her on that side. Like, I was chuckling when I was reading this book just because of how funny Naomi Osaka is. I guess that just shows how he managed to sort of make us, especially like us teenagers, to relate to the book, which yeah, I love. And I guess now we can move on to the specific things I like about. I try to not give any spoilers because obviously I feel like a lot of you guys are gonna read this book, so I'm just gonna be as broad as possible. So the first thing, like the first specific thing I really like was the usage of Naomi Osaka's notes app. It's sort of specific. It's really specific, but like in this book, he will often quote Naomi Osaka, and I feel like this is a tradition of hers. It's like she likes to write in her phone's notes app, and she screenshot it and she posted it on Instagram or like Twitter. And it's a way for her to sort of communicate with her fans and her perspective. And there's a lot of incorporations of that inside this book. And I feel like the formatting of this book is that like the paragraph, like the sorry I can't talk, but like the notes app like stands out from the rest. It's a different font, and I feel like that really grabs the reader's attention. So really like that. I feel like it shows how she's talking on her own. It represents her own perspective, which is something we really need in a biography. So it's not just like the author commenting on what she do, it's her trying to like speak through herself. So I really like that. And the other one is sort of on a surface, but it's like the pictures in between. They are really cute. They're so cute. I love the pictures. I was like reading and I saw like baby Naomi. I was like, oh my gosh, she's so cute. Yeah. And the next one is the Black Lives Matter coverage throughout this book. I really loved it. I feel like he's doing what Naomi Osaka wants the audience to do. Like, I'll explain, but I'm not going to tell you guys which chapter, but in one of those chapters, he explained Naomi Osaka's 2020 US Open journey, where she basically wore 7 different masks for the different victims of police brutality, and it was super thoughtful on her part, of course, but I really loved how Rothenberg covered this because he provided like a short paragraph of explanation of what happened to the different victims, and I feel like it's just what Naomi Osaka wanted the audience to be like, because obviously in one of the interviews, one of the interviewer was like, what do you mean by like putting different names on the masks? And Naomi was like, what's the message you're trying to get is the question. And I feel like that just shows how she is trying to educate the public, and from him publishing this book, he's helping Naomi Osaka with educating us about what happened, and I find that super insightful. I really loved how specific he went with the details. And then the next one is her love for her love for Serena Williams throughout. At first, I was skeptical because, like, at first all they talked about is how Naomi Osaka's family followed Serena's throughout like her childhood, and I was like, it's not about Serena, it's about Naomi. And I didn't want the comparison, but I think it was a key thing to mention that many times because the first, like, I feel like the first peak of this book is the 2018 US Open, of course, against Serena Williams. The incident was described beautifully. We really, I feel like, get both sides of the story, of the audience and of Naomi, of how she's like she doesn't know what's going on, and of the audience who's like literally booing because they just dislike the situation in general. But we sort of get those two different sides of the stories, and Serena truly means so much to Naomi Osaka, and I feel like mentioning her at first I thought it was too much, but now I think it's not too much at all, and I feel like it really added on and it build up to what happened in 2018. So I really love that. The next specific one is Naomi's impact she had, where she decided to like literally stop tennis for a day. That was insane because, to be honest, in the tennis community, a lot of people won't understand it because overall tennis is more of a European sport, and there just isn't that many black players, to be honest, playing, like colored players. And for Naomi to do that really shows her like courage. But it's like talking about the book, it just, I feel like from describing how Naomi Osaka decided to withdraw, he literally described it perfectly, and the impact she had is also beautifully described. And there were also some controversies which I did not expect, like perspectives from the other players who like are not affected in what they thought. That was super insightful, and I think mentioning that also sort of builds on into my mind the image I have of her. So yeah. Um okay. That's all the really good compliments I had. Overall, really love this book. But now we'll just move on to some small points that I just did not expect. But like, I'm gonna talk through it because there are some that I'm just not sure about. So the first one is the heckling incident, which happened in Indian Wells. I thought it was an interesting start because it was the start, and I was like, I mean, it is a hook, like it will definitely draw you in. But like, I was like, why are we starting here? And then it's like chronologically written, and after when like the timeline actually gets into the Indian Wells incident, it was just like mentioned in a sentence. And for me, I remember it, but for other readers, I feel like it's sort of hard for them to maybe remember what happened. But yeah, it's used as a hug, definitely, because just mentioning her from her upbringing might be sort of um hard for people to get into it. But I feel like maybe he could have chosen another incident, perhaps like perhaps the 2018 Serena incident. But like, yeah, the heckling one was like, I was kind of confused by it, but yeah. Okay, the next one is, it is really interesting. First of all, do want to say like this book, and I thought I was gonna finish it. I didn't. I finished it in like a month. Well, not a month, like half a month, and I okay, yeah. It's not a bad thing, but I feel like because it's so densely packed, even though it's needed, it's sort of a dense book to read through because there's just so much information. But I think even though that is the case, that's the beauty of it because that's what Naomi Osaka is. There's truly so much to her that's really hard to write a book that's like really sort of easy to read and easy to follow through because there's like so much stuff you genuinely have to cover. But I feel like he maybe can make it more engaging, like by sort of, well, but he's like actually every single thing. Sorry, I'm like all over the place, but I feel like every single thing he covered is fact checked. It's true. So I feel like, to be honest, that's the best he can do. He can't make it super engaging and make it really page turning and manipulate details because in the end it's a biography. So yeah. I mean, yeah, it was interesting, but it's really dense. That's just, I guess, a small critique, but it is needed. Okay. And then I'll talk about her childhood. Her childhood, I loved it. I liked how like he mentioned her childhood because I did not have that knowledge. I literally didn't know that. But the way he mentioned it is getting kind of repetitive because he's talking about how she moved on from one coach to the other coach to the other coach to the other coach, like throughout. And I'm like, it's getting kind of repetitive. I feel like even though it is an essential detail to cover, he could skip out on some of what happened. But yeah, that's just a small thing. And then the other one is the torch moment where Naomi Osaka light the cauldron to the Tokyo Olympics. That was a big moment. And for me, that wasn't covered enough. Like, he did describe it beautifully of how the whole thing worked, how, like, Naomi's the last one and how she, like, went up the stairs with millions of people watching. I was like, okay, like, I get there was like a lot of, what am I saying? It's like he tried to cover it, but I feel like there's just more to it. Like, I feel like I really want to know what Naomi thinks of it. Of course, he said, like, he's quoting Naomi of how, like, Naomi was like, it's like the highlight of my career. Sure, but I feel like there's just more to it because it's literally, I feel like she represents her country, and with all her, like, nationality controversies, there just could be more to it, in my opinion, because it's, as she said, it's her biggest moment in her career. So I feel like it needs to be mentioned more. But yeah, that's just all my critiques. Sorry if I was being a little too harsh. But yeah, overall, okay, now let's get to the good part. Overall, I'll rate this book. Okay, this rating's kind of weird. I'll rate this book 3.75 out of 5 stars. Okay, let me explain. Normally, you just give a book like 3.5 or like 4.5. You give them 0.5s. I was like, this is definitely not a 3.5 book just because of how much info it has. But I don't think, okay, for me, I'm like sort of a harsh whatever book reader, but like for me, I don't have any 5 out of 5 stars book. Like, they have to be perfectly written. Like, for example, my perfectly written book, in my opinion, for biographies, it's like Andrea Gassi's Open. That's actually like a super, super good book. Like, it makes me want to turn a page right after the other to read it, and it's like a biography, everything's true. So I don't think this book is 5 out of 5, and the reason I didn't give it 4 out of 5 stars is just because, as I said before, it's really, really dense, and for me, I feel like it's good, but for the general public, I feel like it's a bit too dense. So I definitely, it's not a 3.5 stars book because, like, as I said, there's so much info. So I was like, okay, I'll just give it a 3.75. But yeah, I mean, as you guys can see, I do have a lot of compliments, and I really truly love this book, even though I didn't get to finish it as fast as I would have liked to, but it was really a good book, and really happy that I got to read it, even though I said it's like 3.75. For a lot of you guys, it might not be that high, but for me, it's like a really good rating because it's close to 4, which is like what I give to a lot of books. And yeah, because overall, I feel like Rothenberg did a really good job on covering it. I feel like with him putting so much detail and the density of this book, it really built on what I think of Naomi Osaka, because as a teenager and as someone that loves Naomi Osaka, I already have a version of her in my brain, but by reading more of this book, I feel like I'm building on to her. Like, I'm knowing more of her that I did not know I didn't know. Like, I thought I knew everything, but I learned so much more, and I feel like from my other identity, a teenager point of view, from reading this book, it's sort of, Naomi's so funny that it's really relatable, and I guess in that way, it also shows Naomi's sort of, I guess it's getting analytical, but marketability to younger generations, because for me, it's like she's such a relatable player, and it's really hard, I feel like, to find players that are as relatable as her, and Rothenberg really did a really good job on covering that through with all those quotations from those press conferences. So yeah, really loved it, and I guess that's the end of today's episode. After this episode, our next episode will go back to our regular tournament updates. But yeah, I hope you guys really enjoyed. I love this book, and if you guys want to go buy it, make sure to check the Amazon link, and I left the podcast link to the author's podcast if you guys want to go check it out. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Bye.